welcome back for week 2. I hope everybody's excited to be here. My goal today, and I'm going to go through this here in a second, I'm going to give you guys a whole bunch of information, and hopefully this can be somewhat interactive because I'm probably going to give you some information that you might be a little bit shocked by, you may have questions by. So we'll go ahead and jump right in. I want to just do a quick little recap. So last week we really talked all about what is Calvin football, right? So if you go back and you look, the title of this class is College Football from Calvin's Campus to the National Stage. And so last week we really talked about Calvin football. Everything Calvin football, really kind of what our program is made of, what it's based on, where we're at Calvin with college football today. And so now we're going to move on today more to the national stage of college football. So still talk a little bit of Calvin football today, but I'm going to talk a little bit more about, you guys have probably heard the phrase, the changing landscape of college football. College football is in a really fragile place in several different areas right now. So I want to talk about that. And like I said, if you have questions, just interrupt me. I've got 3 spaces in here blocked off for questions about really kind of the 3 different topics that I want to talk about today. So I'm excited to see you all. Thanks for braving the cold and the parking spots and all that. So we can dive right in. So just wanted to give a quick recap. We talked about last week at Calvin. We do have a mission statement for Calvin football. We will develop and mentor young men to be champions for life. And when we talk about that, we talked about those 4 areas last week. So we talked about champions on the field, in the classroom, in the community, and champions of faith. Again, really important. That's what drives our program, right? So that's our mission statement. That's what drives our program right here at Calvin. And then we also have our core DNA, which we went in really in depth with this last week, but just wanted to remind you of our mission statement and then what our core DNA is here. So connection, grit, intention, and joy. That's really what our program here at Calvin is built upon from a football standpoint. So that's just a quick little recap of all the things we talked about last week. And now I want to jump in really to this next part here. So when you look, we've got 3 sessions of this class last week, today, and then next week will be our last session. And so today we're going to focus right here. Big picture, college football on a national stage. And what does this look like? All the way from Calvin across the country. So last week, talked Calvin football. Today we'll be here, and then next week we'll talk about the impact that college football has on campuses across the country. So, outline for today, here's where we're going to go, right? So we're going to talk about, and I've really left about, hopefully, 15 to 20 minutes for each number here, and then some time for questions at the end of those, and then we'll do questions at the end of the whole session as well. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is just a college football overview, the different levels of college football. If you've never heard that explained, it's very interesting to learn about the different levels of college football and what those mean from a campus standpoint, from a scholarship standpoint, to playoffs, to what makes the different levels different. Why do we have different levels of college football? Then we're going to get into the NCAA transfer portal, which that's a scary place to live, but we're going to dive into the transfer portal, and I'll answer questions to the best of my ability there. And then we'll jump into NIL, name, image, and likeness. Probably a lot of questions around that. So again, I want to be a resource for that today. Whatever questions you guys have, I want to answer them. I'm going to explain each of those topics to the best of my ability, and then we'll go from there. So let's just jump right in. All right, so here's just a college football profile. So when we look at college football, here's a breakdown of the different divisions. So we have NCAA Division I, which you'll hear that referred to as FBS, right? FBS. That's NCAA Division I. Then we have NCAA Division I AA, which that's called FCS. Then we have NCAA Division II, NCAA Division III, which that's where Calvin lives, and then we have the NAIA. So when you break this down, there's 4 different divisions in the NCAA, and there's 1 division in the NAIA from that standpoint. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into kind of an in-depth breakdown of each different level, give you some examples, and then have some time for questions at the end. So when we talk about NCAA Division I football, FBS, so teams that you would be familiar with in the area that fit this mold would be Michigan, Michigan State, Western Michigan, Central Michigan, Eastern Michigan. That's FBS football, Division I football. And the thing that makes Division I football, FBS, different than other levels are a few different things here. So the first one, there's 134 FBS football programs in the country, and 134 in the country, all right? There are 10 FBS conferences, okay? So those are broken up, by teams, and you play within your league throughout the course of the year whenever you're talking about those conferences. And then each team is allowed 85 full ride scholarships. So when we start talking about the differences in the different levels, scholarships is what really starts to come into play. And so if I am being recruited by an FBS program, a Division I football program, I'm either going to get a full ride or I'm not going to get anything from football, right? And so the average roster size in this level is 115 to 120 student athletes, right? So when I'm talking FBS football, 115 to 120 student athletes on the roster, 85 of those student athletes are going to be on a full ride. That means all their school is paid for, their housing's paid for, their food is paid for. Life is sweet for those 85 guys, right? That's what makes this really, really cool. Now, there's some legislation out there right now. Now let's talk about this piece here. So if there's 85 kids on a full ride scholarship, 115 to 120 on the roster, that means those other kids, non-85, are what is typically called a walk-on, right? So that means that they are on the team, but they're paying for their own school. They're paying for a lot of their own things. Now, there's some legislation out there that's going to be voted on in May that's going to potentially take this number of 85 and make it 105 full ride scholarships and no walk-ons. So they would cap their roster at 105 with no walk-ons. So every kid would be on a full ride scholarship. So again, we're talking Division I, FBS football, and these are the teams that you'd be familiar with that fit that model. So those kids that are playing on TV, the majority of those guys that are playing are on a full ride scholarship. Everything is paid for from that standpoint. All right, let's talk about the next level. So the next level is Division I, AA football, FCS. Now, people in Michigan maybe aren't as familiar with that because there's not an FCS program in the state of Michigan. So a few national teams that maybe you've heard of in this. So North Dakota State, Missouri State, University of Montana, Illinois State. These fall into the category of FCS football. All right, FCS football, Division I AA. So let's talk about what makes this unique. So there's 129 FCS football programs in the country, 129. There were 134 FBS programs, all right? There's 13 conferences. Each team is allowed 63 full ride scholarships, all right? So who can remember? Here's your first quiz of the day. FBS, how many scholarships did they have? 85, right? We had 85 there. Now we have 63 scholarships, okay? Average roster size here is going to be 95 to 120. 95 to 120 is the average roster size here. So let's talk about what makes this different. You see the word here, it says split. All right, so these scholarships can be split. So if we're carrying 95 to 120 on our roster, and we have the equivalent of 63 scholarships, now head coaches or whoever's deciding scholarships can split this money up. So they could have every kid on their team with scholarship money. They could give out 63 full ride scholarships. The rest of them are walk-ons. They get to choose. So from their university, whatever it costs to go to school there, they have a pot of gold. And it's the equivalent of 63 scholarships. And they get to spend that how they see fit on their roster. All right? So that's when you really have to be a CPA to be a head coach at that level. So I coached at that level for 2 years right here. And that's a lot of fun because you can give kids legitimate scholarships and you can decide, hey, we're going to get what we did where I was at. We gave out 50 full rides, and then we had 13 that we split up. And so you can do it however you want to do it. So the recruiting piece it can get tricky at this level, right? It can get really, really tricky at this level from that standpoint because you still have to have a full roster. Now you have 63 scholarships, all right? So let's move on to the next level here, all right? So the next level, NCAA Division II football, right? NCAA Division II football. So when we talk about Division II football, we're talking about Grand Valley State, Ferris State, Davenport, Wayne State. Those are familiar faces in the state of Michigan, all right? So NCAA Division II football. Now is when things start to get significantly different, all right? Significantly different from a money and a cost standpoint. So when we're talking about this, now there's 162, right? 162. There was 134 Division I, 129 1AA, 162 Division II football programs. So there's a few more across the country, right? A few more of these. Now, they play in 17 different conferences. So again, now we have a few more different conferences as well. And each team now is allowed the equivalent of 36 scholarships. So we went from 85 to 63, now we're at 36. What's different about Division II is you don't have to have 36. It's up to your institution. So Division I, FBS, you're going to have 85 or you're not an FBS team. Division I AA, you're going to have 63 or you're not an FCS program. In Division II, you can have up to 36 equivalencies of full ride scholarships, and you can spend them however you would like to. So this is where recruiting can get really tricky at the Division II level, because I don't know this for a fact, but I'm just throwing this out there. Let's say Grand Valley State, all four of these teams are in the same conference, right? All four of these teams are in the same conference, but not all of them have to have the same equivalency of scholarships. So let's say Grand Valley has 36 scholarships. Well, Ferris might only have 29 scholarships. It's up to your institution. And sometimes when budgets get cut and different things like that, scholarships are the first things to go. And so when you talk about competitive advantage, competitive disadvantage, NCAA Division II, there's a lot of things that can make programs different than each other from that standpoint. And then you're still going to carry that same size roster. So average roster size, 95 to 120 student athletes, you have the equivalent of 36 full ride scholarships. So another key element that comes into play at the Division II level are institutional discount rates. So has anybody ever heard of an institutional discount rate? Okay, so institutional discount rates say, hey, every student's going to pay an average of 47% of full cost, whatever that would look like. So some Division II schools will put in a discount rate on the football program or basketball or whatever program and say, hey, you have 36 scholarships, but the most you can give a kid is 47% of total cost. So it's very different from every Division II school. That's when things can start to get a little bit more unclear. Division I, FBS, Division I AA, FCS, pretty clear from a scholarship standpoint, pretty cut and dry. Division II, it starts to really look different depending on what school you're at, depending on how your program is funded from that standpoint. All right, NCAA Division III. So this is where Calvin University lives, and this is significantly different than the other divisions when it comes to scholarship and cost. All right, so 243. Wow, that number's huge, right? Large number. Part of that is because a lot of those schools that you see the numbers in the 100s for Division I, Division II, it's easier to have Division III football because you're not given scholarship money, right? And so there's 243 Division III football programs in the country. There are 29 NCAA Division III conferences. There should be another line there, Division III. No athletic scholarships in NCAA Division III, right? So if you're playing Division III athletics, you're not on an athletic scholarship. Can you be on an academic scholarship? Absolutely. Merit-based scholarships. There's lots of ways for financial aid packages to work. But when it comes to NCAA Division III recruiting, very different in my role. Because if I was at a Division II school or Division I school, the initial conversation I would have with families is, hey, this is the amount of money we're going to give you. We would put a value on their son, right? Whereas here, we are not. We are not doing that. I actually have nothing to do with financial aid, which is great for me. I don't have to get into arguments with parents about how much money I'm giving their son. Because when you're at another school that's not a full ride, you're constantly going back and forth with parents. Like, well, I think he's worth more than that. I'm like, well, I think your son's worth everything, but I can't give him everything, right? And so Division III makes it very clean. We're really all, for the most part, battling with the same size bat, if that makes sense. And so very unique, very different how that works in NCAA Division III, but there are no athletic scholarships. What you're going to see here, another major difference between Division III and the other levels, 95 to 150 plus, right? So there's teams in Division III that will carry 175, 200 athletes on their roster, and it makes for just it's a hard experience for those guys. That's just my personal opinion, but I feel pretty passionate about it. We have 120 lockers in our locker room, and that's where we're going to live from a roster size here. That's just really a standard size roster, okay? So I have a slide here, and I think two slides that's going to show you all the different divisions together that we've talked about, but this next one's very unique. So when we talk about NAIA football, right, so has anybody heard of NAIA before? All right, so when you talk about NAIA, different than NCAA. So NCAA is the governing body, right, of those four different levels. NAIA is the governing body of this. So when we talk about NAIA football, right, NAIA football, here's just a few programs: Dordt University, Siena Heights, Madonna, Lawrence Tech. Those are some schools around the area that maybe you've heard of before. Those are NAIA programs. So the NAIA is completely separate from the NCAA, right? Completely separate from the NCAA. They are their own governing body when it comes to rules and regulations. So you look at this, there's 97 NAIA football programs, so that's the smallest division of all the divisions from a number of programs standpoint, all right? 21 NAIA conferences. Very, very interesting here, right? And a lot of people have never heard of this before. So at the NAIA level, you can have as much money as you want for scholarships. You can fundraise money for it as much as you want. Throughout the course of a game, you can only play the equivalent of 24 scholarships. Now, who's managing that, right? Very, very unique. It's a very so some programs in the NAIA say, hey, well, we're just going to have the equivalent of 24 scholarships. Some people have the equivalent of 65 or 70 scholarships. You have to manage who all plays in a game, how much money they're getting paid to go to school, and only 24, the equivalent of 24 scholarships, can play throughout the course of a game. So the NAIA, very interesting land to live in. Yeah, very, very unique from that standpoint. They're going to carry 95 to 150, so very similar to a Division III school from a roster size standpoint, but it's a different world, right? The NAIA is a completely different world than the NCAA. They operate off of different rules, and they really govern themselves from that standpoint. So that was a whole bunch of information that I just gave you. So let's just recap this, all right? So you can see what makes each different level of college football different from another. All right, so you can see how many programs, right, there are, how many different conferences, the number of scholarships, and then the roster size. One thing we didn't talk about on here, right, was the model of playoffs, and we can have a huge argument about this later if you guys want to. So when you look at these bottom four here, so 1AA, Division II, Division III, and the NAIA, they have a set playoff system that's been in place for a long time, right? And so when you look at 1AA, Division II, Division III, approximately 40 teams get in the playoffs from that standpoint. So the top 40 teams in all those divisions get in the playoffs. Now, one thing I think that people can quickly take for granted in Division III is if I'm an NAIA school, or I'm sorry, if I'm a Division 1AA school or Division II school, there's 129 and 162 programs. Roughly 40 of those teams will get into the playoff. The NCAA Division III just expanded from 32 to 40, and there's 243, right? So that's a very large group of schools that we're competing against from that standpoint. And then in the NAIA, 20-something is the number in their playoff system. And then NCAA Division I, so that's obviously a brand new playoff system, right? So they expanded to 12 teams this year. Before that, they were at 4. Before that, they really didn't even have a playoff system. So that's what makes the different levels of college football unique to each other. Hopefully some of that information was somewhat interesting, so you have a little bit better understanding of what that piece looks like from the different levels. Again, that's just a broad picture of what is college football. Now you kind of know what different teams are in each different level and what that looks like. So that's kind of part one of this session. Questions. What questions do we have from that? Love that. I love questions, by the way.
The 24 number for NAIA, who keeps track of that in each game? I mean, each school has to do it themselves, but if they're breaking the rules, how does that, who follows up on that?
Yeah, the NAIA is a self-reporting body, so you tell me. No, so what there'll be one institution typically in each conference that is the kind of the head of that conference, and it's really, hey, we trust that you're doing the right thing. Each institution has a compliance officer, so they give all those number 2 compliance. But good luck.
Are there, in football, do they have any where a school might be Division I football, but Division II for all other sports? Or?
Yes, that's a great question. And so, football at times does operate independently from the rest of the athletic department. There's not very many, but there are a few where that is the case, yes.
What do FBS and FCS stand for?
Football Bowl Series. Sorry, let me go back to that. Football Bowl Series and football, do you know what the C stands? Championship Series. Yeah, yep, football championship subdivision. Thank you, glad you're here.
The NIA Cornerstone does not have football, so they have not 24 scholarships, basketball?
No, I don't know the basketball number. That's just for football. So for basketball, there is a number. I don't know what it is. 10. So there's 10 in the NAIA.
Trent, Division III sounds really pure, and we all know that it's not. From your perspective, how do schools get around the fact, how do they recruit students without offering athletic scholarships?
Yeah, that's just a very honest point that you're making. I'll say this. Having worked at every level, I think that Division III is the most pure, but there are each financial aid office is different, right? And the relationship between the athletic department and the financial aid office is supposed to be a very clean cut in Division III. And so, that's where you can, if it's going to get messy, that's where it could get messy, is how involved is the athletic department with the financial aid office? Can you pick up the phone and call the financial aid office and say, hey, this guy's really good. You know what that means, right? And so that's where it could get a little bit fuzzy. I think that Division III is the most pure, and generally speaking, I think people know when you're in Division III that that's how it works. But there are definitely, that's how it could get unpure, is when those lines start to get blurred between, does a coach have influence over the financial aid package? Because we're not supposed to. We're not supposed to have any influence over it. When you do, that's when you can start getting running. At Calvin, we have the named scholarships, which is an incredible situation for the students here, but that can't be used for student athletes. At some places it is. What's that? Right, exactly.
Trent, I have a question about the caps of the roster size. Does
Yeah.
that then not include red shirt and like practice squads? Are there kids that are just on a practice squad but not counted in that roster size?
No, so that's the final roster size, and that's just the averages. There are very few Division I programs above 120. Typically, the institution at the Division I level will set that, and it's based off of Title IX. They will so whenever I was at Hawaii, our roster number was 117. That was the most that we could be. This is just the average, but anybody who's a walk-on or a red shirt or a gray shirt or whatever colored shirt, that they all count on that final number there. Good question. Yes.
If you could just wait till the microphone comes, that will help our online participants.
How many teams in our Division III, get into the
To the playoff. Yeah, so 40. So it just expanded this year. So it had been 32 for a long time, and they just added 8 more teams. So now it's a 40-team playoff. Yep, great question.
In Division III, there's 29 conferences. Does every conference champ get an invitation to the postseason?
Yeah, that's a great question. So yes, they do. In Division III, if you win, that's the most basic way. If you for sure want to get into the playoff, win your conference. If you win your conference, you're going to get into the playoff, and then from there they take the next best teams.
But I'm thinking back a few years, the MIAA for a few years didn't seem to have enough teams in the conference. So there were some silly things that happened a number of years back where teams came to play in the MIAA only in football, and the MIAA was doing that because they were just looking for that automatic bid. Do you know what I mean?
That would be my best guess. I don't know that for sure. That would be my best guess on that.
Okay.
Good questions. All right, so if you have any more about this, we'll come back to it at the end. I want to make sure that we're able to cover at least the majority of this content. So the next thing that we're going to move to is the NCAA transfer portal. And there will be some questions that you ask me about the portal that I say, I don't know. I'll just be very honest with you about that. But this is when you talk about the changing landscape of college football, this is a major, major, major change that in 2021 came into effect. And so I'm going to do my best to explain to you what the transfer portal is, and then I'll take some questions at the end of that. So, what is the NCAA transfer portal? This is the definition of the transfer portal. The NCAA transfer portal is an online database that lets college athletes indicate they want to transfer to another school. It helps manage the transfer process and makes it more transparent for schools. So that's just the definition. I will get into some more details here in just a second. So how does the transfer portal work? All right, so here's how it works. 4 steps, basically. An athlete tells their current school that they want to transfer. Notice that doesn't say they tell their coach. It means they tell their current school. So literally, a person on any team in the NCAA can send an email to their compliance officer and say, hey, I'm out of here. And then they put their name in the NCAA transfer portal. The school has a set amount of time to enter the athlete's name into the database. That amount of time is 48 hours. They've got 48 hours to put that person's name into the transfer portal. At that time, coaches and staff from other schools can then contact the athlete. Athletes can remain in the portal until they find a new school. So, what does all this mean? So, before 2021, if I'm at Calvin University and for some reason I want to transfer, there's a process that I have to go through. Kids have always been able to transfer, but you had to fill out a waiver, and it had to get approved by the NCAA, and they would determine, yes, you can transfer, but you're going to have to sit out for a year, or yes, you can transfer and you'd be eligible right away. If you're transferring within your conference, then you have to maybe sit for 2 years. There were some really strict rules around it that really discouraged kids from transferring. Every time you transfer, your percentage of chance of graduation goes down 26%. So we really don't want kids to transfer. I'm talking at Calvin, but I'm really talking everywhere just in general, right? So what happened was in 2021, athletes started to throw a fit, basically, is what has happened. And the NCAA just said, we're going to deregulate all of this and let kids start to just choose, right? So kids were able to choose, oh, I want to go somewhere else. I can just click a button. Now I'm in the NCAA transfer portal, and it's a national database. So on December 29th of this year, I looked at the transfer portal. There were 5,297 kids in the transfer portal, right? So about 27% of kids that get in the portal actually get out of the portal and go somewhere else. And so this is just my opinion. I'm just giving you my opinion right now. I do not like the transfer portal. I think that it teaches kids how to quit. I think when we talk about we want to instill grit and we want to instill hard work and we want to instill discipline in kids, I think it does the exact opposite, right? It just allows them to just walk away really just because they feel like it. There's always been a way to transfer. There's always been a way to do that if your circumstance dictates that that is best. And the NCAA was always very fair with that. And this has really allowed, people just come and go and come and go and come and go, and it makes it very transactional whenever you want to be transformational. A 4-year college experience, a 4-year student-athlete experience should be a transformational time in a young person's life. And when you're at 4 different schools, that makes it really challenging. It also makes it really challenging as a coach to keep your roster together and to manage your roster. And so that's kind of where it's at. So who can use the portal? The NCAA transfer portal is only accessible to coaches and administrators in the NCAA. So I have a login I have an account with the transfer portal. I can log in. I can see who all's in there, right? NAIA and 2-year college athletes do not have access to the portal. There's no such thing as the NAIA portal. They can really just kind of come and go as they want at that level. But so what has happened through all of this, which is not a great thing at all, is student athletes have started to, well, if I'm going to get in the portal, I want to make sure that I have a plan to get out of the portal. So before they ever get in, they'll contact other coaches. They'll say, oh, yes, we would take you. You should get in the portal. Also, if I'm a coach at a Division I school and I have 85 scholarships and I recruit a young person and that person comes and maybe they're not as good as I thought they were. Now as a coach, this is where coaches are abusing the transfer portal. They'll say like, hey, I think you should just get in the portal. Go find somewhere else to play, right? So it's bad on both sides, right? Because coaches are grossly misusing the transfer portal. players are grossly misusing the transfer portal, right? It's not set up to be really healthy for teams, right, through this deal. So why would an athlete get in the portal, right? Why would someone say, hey, I'm going to get in the transfer portal, right? So, I mean, there's a whole bunch of different reasons. Playing time, money, homesick, miss their girlfriend. I mean, there's all different types of reasons why. But what we found over the last 4 years, this is just allowing student athletes to just quit, to just learn how to quit and to just move on. And what's so sad is I've been at some Division I schools where kids were on scholarship. They get in the transfer portal. Nobody else offers them. They just gave up a free education, right? And so to me, it's not going in a healthy direction right now with the NCAA transfer portal. Again, the NCAA has always had framework in place to where a student athlete could transfer. If they deem that it was the right thing for them to transfer, you can fill out a waiver, you go through a process, and you do that. But now, where I think it's sad is if you think about Michigan or Michigan State football, right? If you're a fan of one of those two programs in the state and a kid comes there as a freshman and you get to know him, right? You see him every Saturday on TV and he's a Michigan or Michigan State person. Well, now you've got a whole new roster every year, right? And so where it's really, really been impactful is in sports with smaller rosters. When you look at basketball, I mean, there were Division I basketball teams last year that after March Madness, the entire team left. Entire team. If they have 15 kids on their team, every single kid got in the transfer portal, and then they recruit a whole other team. And then another thing, if a coach takes another job or if a coach leaves, well, if I've recruited these 10 kids, they all leave with them. So now coaches get hired based on who you can bring with you. So that's really kind of getting into the weeds of it. But that's a 10,000-foot view of the NCAA transfer portal, and it's literally just a database. You just send one email, and you can get into the transfer portal. So my opinion is that it's not a great thing, but that's exactly what it is. So when you hear people talk about the transfer portal, that's what they're talking about. So what's happened, the NCAA, in my opinion, has realized, okay, maybe this isn't great, but what do we do about it? Because the toothpaste is kind of out of the tube. Putting it back in is really challenging to do. They've given the players a whole bunch of power and given coaches a whole bunch of power with that. So they're working to try to figure out what framework can we put around this. So what they've landed on at the Division I level, there are 2 times of the year, there are 10-day periods where you can get in the transfer portal. You can stay in it for as long as whenever, but you can only get in at certain times of the year. They're working towards only one, what they call portal window. Right now there's 2 transfer portal windows when you can actually get into the transfer portal. So that's what the transfer portal is. Questions about the transfer portal?
If a student enters the portal, are they giving up their financial aid at the school where they have been as soon as they enter the portal?
I meant to answer that question earlier. It's up to the school, right? So, and it's not even up to the school, it's up to the coach. And so you can treat it however you want to treat it, which makes it really hairy as well because, there's some programs where the coach says, like, I'm great if you go explore. So then you have 15 kids in the transfer portal just seeing if there's anything else out there. And if not, well, then I'll just come back to my team. I think that makes team culture really hard. And then there's some coaches that say, hey, when you get in the transfer portal, you're out. You're done, financial aid's cut off. So it's up to the individual program of how that works.
So the portal windows are certainly a step toward a solution.
Yeah.
But in reality, like you said a few minutes ago, the pre-portal activity
Yeah.
between players and coaches is still
Right.
going to go on.
Right.
How do you stop? What guidelines are there for the tampering charges? How do you stop that? Is it really going to change anything?
Yeah, no, so that's a great question, and that's literally a $10 million question right now of how do we stop it? Because what's happening now is, well, I know I can't get in the portal till December 10th, but on November 21st, I'm going to go on my social media and say, hey, November 10th, I'll be in the transfer portal, right? So there's really not a window. And what happens is there's all this tampering with student athletes outside of that. So in my personal opinion, the first thing that has to happen is they've got to catch somebody tampering and they've got to hammer them. I mean, they're going to have to make an example out of a program in order for somebody to, because right now it's just, there's nothing bad's happening to anybody and it's just kind of a known thing of like, yep, we're going to tamper and You have to recruit your next class and your entire roster at the same time. So, don't have an answer.
Is the transfer portal affecting Calvin in the same ways you're talking about it as a broad
That's a
thing?
great question. So, to answer your question, not very much. We had one young man after the season get in the transfer portal, went to a different situation. It was more financial than anything else, but it really has not. In Division III, when we talk about Division III being pure, Division III has still remained somewhat pure from that standpoint. And I'll be very transparent with this answer. A lot of kids do not get in the transfer portal with the dream of going Division III, because somewhere else they were getting money to play, right? And so a lot of kids don't go in saying, hey, I want to go Division III, and a lot of programs that are recruiting out of the portal are not recruiting Division III athletes, and that's just me being perfectly honest. I think, generally speaking, Division III athletes understand that. Where you do see it a little bit is Division III to Division III transfers. So someone in our league could get in, go to another school in our league. But at Calvin so far, it has not been a huge deal, which is good.
Kudos to you.
Honestly, it's kudos to this institution because kids want to be here. They want to stay here, which is great.
How much has it changed your recruiting strategies in the sense that you may not get a kid when you first recruit him out of high school,
Yep.
but you may get him 2 or 3 years later. So how does that change what you do
Yeah.
while you're in the recruiting cycle?
Yeah, that's a great question because people have asked me, how do we use the transfer portal to enhance our roster? The number one way are young men that we've recruited that maybe went to a Division II school or went and walked on at a Division I school, and they get there and then they decide it's not what they thought it was, and then they get in the portal and hopefully come back to us. So to answer your question, through the recruiting process, I feel like it never ends, right? So if we're recruiting a young man and he decides, I'm going to go to, for example, I'm going to go to Grand Valley or any school that you could think of. I'm going to go somewhere else. Hey, that's great. Wish you nothing but the best. Let's stay in touch. I mean, you know what I mean? And you can't stay in touch with them through text and calls, but you can always leave the door open to, hey, if it doesn't work out, you can come back, which just feels really dirty, right? It just does. But that's where we have used the portal up to this point was guys that we've recruited over the last 2 years. Now, if they're unhappy and they call us, we know who they are, they know who we are, and that's where it's really here has worked up to this point. So you always want to end a recruitment really well with a family because you never know. Great questions. Anybody else? Okay, we'll move on to the next topic, which everybody will love to talk about this. Name, image, and likeness. Anybody ever heard of NIL? Okay, this is going to blow your minds potentially. All right, name, image, and likeness. So, there'll be a lot of things I don't say that I say I don't know when you ask me these questions, but I'll do my best. NIL, what does it stand for? NIL stands for name, image, and likeness. It refers to the legal right of college and high school athletes to profit from their fame. Very, very interesting here, how this has all come about when it comes to NIL. So how does NIL work? Athletes can earn money through NIL deals, name, image, and likeness deals, such as endorsements, merchandise sales, signed memorabilia. NIL collectives may pay athletes for services like charity work, meet and greets. Those are just a couple of examples. Athletes can use their name, image, and likeness in advertisements and promotions for products and service. So that's how it works, and I'll give you some more details here in a second. So history of NIL. All right, so the NCAA previously prohibited student athletes from profiting from their name, image, and likeness, right? So the NCAA felt like, hey, we're paying for your school, we're paying for your food, we're paying for your housing. I think that's enough, right? Well, it wasn't. So in 2021, the NCAA changed its rules to allow student athletes to participate in NIL activities. Many states have passed laws around NIL, right? A lot of states have name, image, and likeness laws. Okay, some states don't. The NCAA has basically said that the states will govern those rules, not the NCAA, which is not a good thing in my opinion. In May of 2024, the NCAA agreed to pay nearly $2.8 billion to athletes who were financially harmed by its previous rules. So essentially, student athletes going 10 years back that didn't have the chance to get NIL, they were going to sue the NCAA, so they gave them a whole bunch of money to make them be quiet, basically is what happened there, right? So that's the history of name, image, and likeness. So what does all this mean, right? So what does name, image, and likeness mean? We can talk about this for a really long time. And so for the longest time, up until 2021, the NCAA basically said, we're going to operate off the student-athlete model. So student athletes are not going to get paid for being athletes. You're not going to get paid for being on TV. You're not going to profit, right? And then really kind of the original intent behind a lot of name, image, and likeness was, hey, they're selling my jersey in the bookstore. The university's making money off of it. I should get a cut out of that. Some people can say, like, yeah, I would agree with that, right? Some people can get behind that. I'm signing autographs. I should get a cut of that money. So that's where it all started. And then it has just snowballed to a place where you could say borderline out of control, right? So let's go back to Division III being pure, right? And so this is one area that it hasn't hit Division III hard, but it is coming to NCAA Division III when you talk about name, image, and likeness. So essentially what's happened is now you have student athletes who have now hired agents who are assigning a worth, right, a net worth to that student athlete, and they're trying to negotiate name, image, and likeness deals. So on here, earlier it talked about, where's this at? A collective, right? So what's happened is the name, image, and likeness piece and the athletic department piece are supposed to be separate from each other. But what universities have formed are what they call collectives. And so these are people that collect the money and distribute the money, essentially to student athletes. And so each institution can really kind of run that how they would like to, but the people who are running the collectives are the ones determining this is how much money we're going to give this person for signing 10 footballs or whatever that looks like. And so now universities are using this in recruiting. They're using it for transfer portal reasons, and this is where it's all been, in my opinion, kind of a perfect storm. You know, because at the end of the day, when a student athlete is on a scholarship, they are getting paid. This is just my opinion. They are getting paid, right, for what they're doing. Where I think this can hurt college athletics is now we've got guys who are living in kind of a professional world, but still in college, right? And so what does this look like? How are these athletes being paid? Are they being paid through 1099s? Well, if they are they getting tax education? What does all that look like? And then whenever they're done and they've graduated, the money's not coming in anymore. So what are we teaching these athletes while we're doing it? Here's what I'll say. With the transfer portal and name, image, and likeness, it's here, and it's not going to go away, right? But to me, what the NCAA has to find is like, how can we better manage this? Because it's being leveraged in recruiting in a huge, huge way right now. I would say at the Division I level, that's probably the number one reason why student athletes get in the transfer portal is because of name, image, and likeness. How much can I go get paid? Well, if I'm the best quarterback at UCLA, I'm going to get in the transfer portal because I know somebody will go pay me, which makes it really hard to manage a roster because you recruit a student athlete, you think you do a great job, you get some really good athletes on your team. And now what's happening at the Division I level, the best players all get in the transfer portal to test their market value. And then coaches have to decide, am I going to let him come back or not? Well, I don't know. He was just a finalist for the Heisman. I might let him come back on my team, or do you not? So there's just a lot of things around that make it really, really challenging. Now, I do think that there's a place for, if a student athlete is doing charity work and a restaurant wants to give them, hey, we're going to feed you guys burgers once a week, I think that's great. I think there's a lot of things that can be great from this, but I think when it gets leveraged in recruiting, I think that can make it a major challenge for families. I think it puts a lot of unnecessary stress on student athletes because now you have kids that, hey, I need to get an NIL deal to help provide for my family. Whereas where did we get away from just the pure student athlete model, right? And so, I mean, in Division III, there are institutions that have a collective, right? And they are participating in name, image, and likeness deals. And now athletes can go get deals on their own, right? You can sell merchandise with your name on the back of it, and you can actually get paid for that. And so that's where name, image, and likeness is currently today, and that's where that and the transfer portal, it all really kind of works together, which it can get really, really messy if we're not careful with that. So, all right, that's name, image, and likeness. Questions about that? He's bringing the mic around.
Are NIL collectives part of the university structure?
Yeah, so that's a great question. They're really not. They're basically an independent contractor. They work with the university. They're not part of the university. It's really messy. It's very messy.
This makes it very hard for big colleges with deep pockets and to make a fair playing field, to put it, for smaller colleges with a less pocketbook. My second question is, it's kind of in this, but not, it's disconcerting to watch senior signing day, because they sign and then you read a couple months later, no. And I have a feeling that NIL might be behind some of this. So how do you work with that?
It's a great question. So you're exactly right whenever that happens, because when you do on National Signing Day, when you sign, it used to be very binding. But now, as soon as that first transfer portal window rolls around, you can get in the transfer portal. So if I'm a high school student athlete and I sign in February and the portal window in May comes around, I can get in the transfer portal without ever stepping foot on the campus where I was supposed to go. And so it gets really hairy. And right now, the reason why it continues to happen is because nobody has an answer for how to fix it. And so I wish I had an answer. I do not have an answer for that. I don't like it. I know I'm working every day on it.
I think part of the problem, even before NIL though, was really with the NCAA and the control of what kind of compensation or other perks could take place. And they were so authoritarian about it that made it seem like, well, these coaches and athletes are getting burned, which might have been true at some time, and then we kind of let free enterprise take place, and now it's literally the highest bidder, you know.
Absolutely.
And players are just, the top 10% are literally just looking for the highest bidder, and the portal and NIL work, they can just transfer wherever they want. And I mean, I think that was the Las Vegas quarterback who didn't play because he didn't get paid. Didn't get paid to play, so he said, I'm done. You know, it gets ridiculous.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and that's where there's no. I mean, they're not signing a physical contract, and so where is the accountability? That's a great example at UNLV this year. If you guys followed that story, UNLV started out really hot. They actually finished hot as well, but they started really hot. And their starting quarterback, week 3 or week 4, came out and said, "Hey, I'm done. I'm leaving the team. They had promised me this much money. They haven't paid me yet, so I'm out." It's like, where does the loyalty to your team come in there? There was obviously no written contract. It was just a gentleman's agreement, because that's what a lot of it is. And it's sad. I mean, it's a sad deal, because now that I don't even know if that kid ended up
be drafting if they go in 4th, 5th round or something like that. So it's a financial decision, but is there a cap in terms of how much you can make in this program?
So the answer is no. There's no cap. And that's something that's on the table right now, because just like you said, there are kids literally that maybe could be drafted that are staying in college because they make way more money playing in college than they would in the, playing beyond college. And so there's not a cap. One thing that's being explored quite a bit right now is TV revenue sharing and making that NIL. So if I'm an athlete in the Big Ten, then we just know, hey, every athlete in the Big Ten is going to get this amount of money, and it's going to come from the TV contracts, and then that would take the collectives out of it. That's kind of the next solution that's potentially on the table. Right now, there's no cap. I mean, I was recruiting out of school, and we had a young man that was committed to us, and then someone else offered him millions of dollars to go. He's 18 years old, offered him multi-million-dollar deal, and then he decided to go play there. So there is no cap on it, which is not a great thing.
How much influence, if any, is the coach allowed to have with the NIL collective in determining who to distribute money to and how much? And does the answer to your question vary depending on Division I, II, or III?
Yeah, so the answer is the coach is not supposed to have any influence on it. The answer is that coaches have a whole bunch of influence on it, and that's where it's gotten out of line, is because when it was originated, athletes were going to profit off of their name, image, and likeness. It's turned into a recruiting tool. So coaches are not supposed to have any influence on it. Now they have a whole bunch of influence on it.
U of M just signed a quarterback from high school for $10 million.
I know.
Does that
So that is name, image, and likeness. That's what that money is. So the collective at Michigan said, hey, we're going to pay him $10 million. He probably has to sign a few autographed footballs or something. And, yeah. But, yes, you're exactly right. Name, image, and likeness. Hopefully he's not in the transfer portal.
Trent, I'm thinking more now down to the Division III level, but it could be at Division I and Division II. Does the institution have any influence on telling the student what they need to use their NIL money for?
So right now the answer is no. It's institution to institution. There's no rules around that. They can literally spend it on whatever they want. Whenever I was at the University of Oregon, I thought they did a tremendous job of bringing in tax education, bringing in budget planners, doing a lot of personal finance with their guys. I thought they did a really good job there of, they knew that NIL was here to stay, and we're going to embrace it, and we're going to educate our kids through this, because you have kids that, maybe come from not much at all, and you're talking about a kid who is making $300,000 a year to play football. He's 18 years old. They don't know what that should look like. And so I think it's really important that institutions going forward, when you have those young men, that you are teaching them personal finance, that you're giving them tax education, that you're teaching them what it means to invest and to budget and what that looks like. Because at the end of the day, 1.6% of all college football players get the opportunity to go to an NFL practice. 1.6% of all of them, right? So over, 98% of guys are not going to make money from playing football ever again. And so when those kids graduate, if I'm at whatever university, I'm making $300,000 a year. The day I graduate, I'm now making $0 a year, right? And so they've got to do a great job of educating. But there's no rules in place of what you can buy whatever you want with that money right now. Yes.
I have kind of an out there question, but as a photographer,
Yeah.
I'm taking pictures of kids. Do I have to be concerned about violating their NIL?
Are you selling them?
No.
Then you're good. Keep taking pictures.
This may be a dumb question, but who is funding these NIL collectives?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. It's all boosters. It is all donors to the college. It's all boosters. 100% donor and booster. Now, I'll say this. There's a lot of NIL deals for your major universities that are restaurants, and they would say, hey, we're going to sponsor the offensive linemen, and once a week they can come into my restaurant, and we'll give them all this burger and this. And so NIL deals are everything from a T-shirt to $10 million, but the actual money piece is coming from donors.
The donors aren't writing the check to the university.
They're writing it to the collective. They're giving it to the collective, and then the collective disperses it, and that's where it all gets. Every place is different, right? Every place is different on how that's being regulated, but no, that's going physically to the collective. Is anybody's mind blown yet? Okay, good.
I am fascinated by this $2.8 billion dollar amount that you talked about. Okay, so now you've got 134, 129, 162, and 97 taking out of the 243 colleges that are in Division III.
Yeah.
How did that all take place, Trent? I mean,
Yeah.
how did who regulated where that 2.8 billion went to?
Yeah.
How far back did they go with athletes?
So from my understanding, that was to the 134 FBS programs, and it basically went back, it was either 8 or 10 years to every kid that was on scholarship got a check for this amount of money. I don't know the exact amount, but it was significant. Because there was enough kids that said, like, well, hey, this wasn't in place whenever I was in college. I would have made this amount of money. Then everybody starts suing the NCAA, and the NCAA is like, well, I guess we just got to pay them all out. What ended up happening was universities had to come up with that money. What else? What other questions?
So Trent, how would you fix this? Would you cap the
Yeah.
amount? What would be like
Yep.
your go-to?
So if you told me, hey, NIL is here, and it's going to happen, this would be, which is a great question. This is what I would do with it, is I would say, okay, all right, we've decided that we're going to pay the student athletes. Whatever dollar number that is, it's going to come from TV revenue, right? And so that way it's a cap for every, let's just say we're going to do this at the FBS level, because that's where it's the most relevant. So Division I, those 134 FBS programs, let's say that we've decided we're going to pay those athletes. So it's going to come from, their conferences' TV deals, essentially. That's where the money's going to come from. And let's just throw the dollar figure out there of $25,000. So let's say we're going to pay them all $25,000 a year. What I would do is I would set up a fund for each student athlete, and I would say, hey, on top of what you're already getting your school paid for and whatnot, of the $25,000 that you're getting every year, $10,000 of it you're going to be able to put in your pocket and you're going to spend. $15,000 is going into a fund that you will get access to when you graduate. And so that's going, when you graduate from this institution, right? So that's going to encourage kids not to transfer in the transfer portal, and it's also going to set them up with some wealth whenever they've graduated. And so there have been people that have proposed things similar to that, because you can argue either way, and you can argue all day long of like, should we pay student athletes, should we not? I don't know what the exact right answer is for that, but just giving them all this money at once and they spend it and they have nothing to show for it when they graduate, I think that's a disservice to student athletes. So I think there's a way that you could do it to where, yes, they would feel and get some of that money in their pocket, right away as they're a student. But the most important thing is that they graduate, and every time you transfer, your chances of graduation are going down. And then whenever you do graduate, like, here you go. Here's this pot of money, and we've helped you be set up for the next few years through that. So if I was going to give a solution, that's what my solution would be. No one will probably listen to me, so it probably won't happen. But, yeah. Great questions. What else? So we have a couple minutes left. So here's what I would say. One, really appreciate your guys' time and attention. What I didn't want to do today, you have another question? Okay. What I didn't want to do today was come in and paint this just very poor picture of college athletics. The student-athlete experience across the country for 500 programs is incredible. It's such a unique opportunity, and for young men and women to have the opportunity to go represent their university through athletics, through their God-given ability, is just an incredible thing. And so I am concerned about the direction that college athletes in general are going, but it's a great, great experience. And people that can use these things the right way, there's a whole bunch of positive. There is a ton of positive going on. I know inside the walls of Calvin football, all of Calvin athletics, man, we have awesome student athletes. There's some greedy people at the top at different places that have gotten this out of line. But I want to reassure you, there's some really good things going on. I wanted to show you today the national scale of college football and where some things are at right now. But I also want to encourage you and let you know, man, there's some really, really exciting things, and it's not all bad. Not all this is all bad. I had to share this with you today so you would know, but that's my take on it. Yeah, Bob?
A lot of talk these days about the NCAA and where their leadership will be in the future
Yeah.
with all this happening,
Yeah.
because frankly, there's people disgruntled with how the NCAA is handling it.
Yeah.
A lot of talk about the SEC and the Big Ten
Yeah.
being the big elephants that will take over college football. If that all happens, if there's a filtering down of 40 or 50 schools that eventually comprise the highest level of FBS, and the NCAA is shelved,
Yeah.
how does that impact us?
Yeah.
At D2, D3, if the NCAA has lost their power at the highest level?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think one thing you could see from that is I do think you could see the top 40 or 50 teams split off from the NCAA and truly form their own. I think the NCAA will stay intact. I think that Division II, Division III football and athletics in general will stay generally how they are right now. And that's one thing that really drew me to Calvin, to Division III, was, going back to your point, it's pure, right? It's the most pure form of it right now, because we have a bunch of student athletes here that love to compete, love to play the game, that love Calvin University. And that's why you see kids stay here. But I think you could see those top 40 to 50 teams create their own NAIA, NCAA, their own, whatever you want to call it, and they would be their own governing body, and they would have salary caps, and it would basically be professional, but not professional athletics at that point. So, which that could be a solution. That could be a solution to where 40 teams have that, and they all get paid $60,000 a year, and everyone else is back to a normal student-athlete model. I think that could be a solution. Oh, my gosh. Conference realignment's a whole nother deal. It's crazy. It's crazy, yes. Yeah.
I think I have a bit of a confession to make. I'm not an athlete, but I'm a fan.
Yeah.
And in Michigan here, I'm a big blue fan, and go blue fan rather. And so with the success of a year ago and the mediocrity of the quarterback this past year, quarterback position, you know, something welled in within me. I wasn't satisfied anymore with being in second place in the league or third place. Missing playoffs, that was unacceptable.
Yeah,
if you're
agreed.
a Go Blue fan. And so I was just hoping and praying that they would acquire a quality quarterback. However,
Yeah.
you have to do that. So I was leaning on those alumni donors to step up to the plate
Yeah.
and bring us a quality quarterback that can bring us back to
Well,
the top.
I think your prayers were answered, I think.
I know.
Here's what's so interesting about that, though. He's 18. He's never played in a college game before.
But I'm opposed to NIL, but you know, in my heart, I'm kind of happy that Michigan benefited from that.
And you know what? I appreciate the honesty. I greatly appreciate the honesty. I'll say this. I don't know that I would say I'm 100% opposed to NIL. There needs to be some very strict regulations with this deal.
Okay, the Division III doesn't give scholarships. How did that happen, that Division III decided not to give any scholarship?
Yeah.
When was that decided, when the league was formed, or?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's been like that forever. I'll be honest, I don't know who made that decision. It's been like that for a really long time, and I don't see that ever changing. That's what makes Division III so incredibly, just different than all the other divisions. So I don't know who made that decision, but it's been like that for a very long time. Do you know? Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and then Division III just stayed put to where they were, and everyone else just kind of moved up the ladder with money.
Trent, is this happening in other sports other than football? I mean, or is it the primary revenue-producing sports?
No,
Is swimming and tennis and
Yeah.
track, obviously basketball's number 2.
Yeah.
Are those sports
Yeah.
feeling this influence as well?
Yeah, you see it in every sport right now. You do. One of the gymnasts from LSU was one of the first to have like a major national name, image, and likeness deal. So, yeah, you see it really. Men's sports, women's sports, across the board it's happening. Yeah. I think where the transfer portal, I think it's affecting small roster sports more than big roster sports, because you'll see there was a volleyball team last spring that their entire team left after the season. I mean, that's just crazy. Crazy. What else? Anything else today? All right, so I gave you all a homework assignment last week. How many high fives could you give? So I'm going to give you the same one again, right? It's all about human connection. And we'll see you guys back here again next week. Thanks for your time.